Hello everyone, you're listening to The Right Side of Gaming. Today we're going to be talking about how to build Azorius or white-blue decks in Magic Legends. Now just sort of a standard disclaimer for this video series. These are aimed at newer players. Established players probably already have a pretty good library of cards, they probably have some of the rarer ones, they probably have an idea of what they can or want to build. They're probably also starting to take into account things like gear and artifacts more than newer players. I understand that. This is, again, aimed more at the newer players who maybe don't have as much and don't really know exactly where to go when they first start out. So we're going to be focusing a lot more on the commons and uncommons, although I will mention some of the higher rarity cards. But the focus is going to be on stuff that they're more likely to have or get early on. I'll probably also try to pick out where the two colors intersect, and then maybe figure out how, if you want to build it a little more one way or the other. Again, this is not the only way to build these decks. You have a lot of options. This is just some suggestions for newer players. Now to start with, there's one thing about the blue-white combo that it's really good at control. That's true in physical card game, and it's true in Magic Legends. In fact, if you remember seeing it, they had that little graphic where they showed all 5 colors and listed their strengths in each one. I think there was about 4 in each category. White and blue both had control listed. So it stands to reason that they have a lot of control effects and cards that benefit from control effects. So white has Phalanx Charge that deals double damage if the enemy hit is controlled by a control effect. Blue has Telestrike, which does the exact same thing, as well as Psionic Shatter, which doesn't have as big of a crit, but you're also going to draw a spell. But all 3 of these are doing more damage if the enemy is controlled by a control effect. That's going to be your stuns, your root, your snares, your disorients, all that good stuff. And they're all commons or uncommons. Blue and white have a lot of control effects, even some really similar ones. White has Radiant Volley, which is going to stun enemies in a line, whereas blue has Icicle, which is going to stun enemies in a line. I know, so varied. But that works out really well because you do want some redundancy sometimes, that you can be consistent. And there's some other types of effects you can branch out into. I'm not going to go through all the blue ones just because there's a lot, but you definitely have your pick of the litter with blue when it comes to control effects, just because there's so many. So you can slip in whatever you've got and probably be okay. White has some good ones too. I happen to like Divine Wrath and Chain Warden myself. But again, you can use whatever you've got because I think there's a little room to play here. Now, if you decide you want to have a little bit more blue focus to your deck, there's one thing blue is really good at, either through the cards itself or through some of the artifacts and equipment you might pick up later on. It's going to be sorceries. Sorceries are definitely big in blue or blue-themed gear and artifacts. And we have a nice uncommon in Alchemic Thaumaturge that's going to make your sorceries cheaper to cast. So you know what gets a cost reduction? Those control effects, and the cards that crit on control effects, because these were all sorceries. Now a little later on in the game, if maybe you get lucky or you start picking up your rare cards, there's a mythic rare called Spellstorm. That's also going to make your sorceries cheaper to cast. And again, that means you can really pump out some of these control and damaging effects pretty well. I should also point out that white and blue have a lot of sorceries that are really good that aren't necessarily tied to that control combo. They both have some really good AoEs, for example, which is great for clearing mobs. You have a lot of room to kind of pick and choose the sorceries you like there. Or maybe you want to have a little bit more of a white focus to your deck, and if white is good at one thing, it's probably going wide, making a bunch of smaller creatures and buffing them up. So So you have Vanillish Archers, which is going to create 3 creatures out on the field. Spawning Bed, which is going to create 5 creatures out on the field. And they're going to hatch those 0/2 eggs to become 1/1 Camarids whenever you cast 2 sorceries. Guess what are sorceries? All of those control combo cards we talked about earlier. Or the cards that get reduced by Alchemic Thaumaturge. We also have Illusory Allies in blue, which is going to create 3 creatures, much like Vanillish Archers. We also have Crusader of Audric, which is an uncommon. That's going to get +1/+1 for every other creature you control. Now, just from some of those spells we just mentioned, Vanillish Archers, Spawning Bed, Illusory Allies, that's 11 creatures right there, potentially, because you have 3 Archers, 3 Allies, and 5 Camarids. So you can bump it up really quickly with some of these go wide cards. If you happen to get some of the rarer cards, you've got things like Zealous Charge, Glorious Anthem, and Vanillish Marshal. That'll give your creatures +1/+1 or +2/+2, and that's really going to add up pretty quickly. Now you don't have to necessarily build any of these. You don't necessarily have to go the control and combo route. You don't necessarily have to go the sorcery route. You don't necessarily have to go the creature go wide route. But you'll notice that there's some overlap there. So you can, for example, invest in some of these sorcery cards and not feel bad about it because, well, they still work out well with your more blue-oriented decks and your more white-oriented decks. And you're probably not going to be able to play, for example, an entire deck of creatures anyway, just because they have those creature points. You top out at 12. You can't necessarily have an entire deck of creatures. You can absolutely do an entire deck of sorceries. No one's going to stop you. That's actually a legitimate building option. But you at least have the option to, slip in maybe some beneficial creatures, and you can kind of mix and match to whatever feels right to you, or just based on whatever you have available. But you can see how just because you invest in one thing doesn't necessarily mean that you're at a loss if you decide to switch your deck up. That's really all I had for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you'd like to leave a like, comment, subscribe, that'd be great. Especially if you want to leave a comment about how you want to build or how you have built your white-blue deck for maybe some of the other new players out there. And if you don't want to do any of that, that's okay too. I understand. Either way, I hope you have an awesome day, and I will catch you next time.